So, which is kind of entertaining because, like, I don't know, a few weeks later, Charlie Moore came and spoke to our junior high. And he's walking back and forth talking about what it is to be a Texas Ranger. Walking, I'm sitting on the front row because I want to have some questions of this man because he is really interesting. Even though my mom didn't want me to be on highway patrol, so but at any rate, I go so many different directions. So I'm sitting on the front row, and Charlie Moore, Texas Ranger, he's walking back and forth telling some great stories about what it's like to be a Texas Ranger, finding people in cabins, looking for fugitives, investigating crimes. And I said, man, that sounds like fun. But I get captivated because each time he walks by, I'm looking at his hip, and he's got a pistol on both sides, and both of them are 1911 45s with ivory grips and gold longhorns on the grips, and I'm looking at those, and then I also noticed that the hammers are back. I was a hunter, and I like to shoot, but I noticed the hammers are back on those 45s, and I thought, oh man! So I kind of drew my toes back up under the seat because I don't want that thing to shoot off one of my toes. And so finally, when he got through telling his stories, he said, "Are there any questions?" And I was the first one. I raised my hand. I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I noticed the hammers are back on those pistols. Is that not dangerous?" And he said, "Yep, Sonny, it's dangerous, and don't ever forget it." So, man, it sealed the deal for me.
For the audience, I am here with another Texas Ranger. I am very excited to interview him. He is going to introduce himself in a minute. Let me just preface this. I have found Texas law enforcement super welcoming, super eager to chat with me, and these guys don't like to brag on themselves, but very, very impressive group down here. So, with that being said, can you introduce yourself?
Lane Aiken.
Lane. And Lane, what is your current position?
Currently, I am the sheriff of Wise County, Texas, just one county northwest of Tarrant County, Fort Worth.
Okay. And prior to that, you were a Texas Ranger for how long?
I was a Texas Ranger and with DPS for 27 years.
Okay. Can you give me a little bit of idea about growing up and what led you to law enforcement?
I grew up in a little community called Rockwall, the other side of the Metroplex. I mean, I was like Beaver Cleaver in that community. It was just a great time. I knew everybody, and I knew who lived where in all the houses. I knew exactly who was living in those houses, and I had a lot of friends, and I ran the streets all the time, and every time I would hear a siren, it would just excite me beyond belief. And I don't know why. It's almost like I wanted to run. I don't know where I was going to run, but there's a siren. I got to run, and I'm going to help. But the thing more so, Niles, than anything was my dad, who was a highway patrolman. They were highway patrolmen back then, not troopers. They were highway patrolmen. And of course, they changed that over time. But when I grew up in that little community, I had that black and white vehicle parked out in front, and I'd see my dad in his uniform. But what really got in my mind was all of the stories that I heard with him and his buddies. Usually in the nighttime, they'd gather up and tell stories. They call them war stories, but they were police stories. And I just loved that stuff. And that's what really got in my mind. And I started in the early age thinking that's what I want to do when I get older. But my mother didn't like it because her husband was in danger on a regular basis, my dad, and plus he didn't make much money. So she was a little bit disenchanted with law enforcement in general. So my mom said, "Lane, I want you to be an accountant or maybe a dentist or an accountant." And I didn't want to be a dentist or an accountant. And I know a lot of good dentists and accountants, and I don't mean to short them, but that's not what I wanted to do. So I went off to college, and playing football, and I was more focused on football than I was school. But I had a great time in college, and still I'm fighting, thinking about I need to be an accountant. I need to be an accountant. And I was just lost, trying to please my mother. I was just lost. And then it came up on me in my mind. I said, I just got to turn toward what I naturally feel like I want to do. So I took a job in law enforcement, and that was 50 years ago.
And Lane, do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. I've got a brother and a sister. The brother is older, and the sister is about 6 years younger than me. She's a retired teacher, principal, educator, still doing some stuff. And my brother, who was 6 years older than me, did 2 terms in Vietnam, and really haven't seen much of him since he returned from Vietnam.
Okay. Okay, so in 1974, you start with the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport Police.
Right.
Why'd you start with them? Was it kind of a shotgun approach, or how'd you end up with those guys?
No, so I'm still caught up in that mindset that my mom wanted me to be an accountant or a dentist, and so I was playing football. I mentioned that moments ago, and in my senior year of eligibility, I broke my jaw playing. We didn't have the helmets that they have now. I mean, it was so I couldn't finish out the season, and I got a call from DFW Airport because I had actually applied at Dallas Fire Department. And so they got my name from Dallas Fire Department. Then they called me because it not only was a police department, it's a police department, fire department, and EMS all rolled into one. And so they called me and asked if I would be interested. Of course, here I am, not been able to finish the season in football, and it just sounded like a good opportunity. A brand new airport, and maybe it would be fun, maybe I would enjoy it. And plus, they had a police side, which played well to what my mindset was. Not so much my mother.
So you're tricking your mom, saying, I'm going to the fire department.
So I rolled into DFW Airport and met with those folks and just had a great time and thought, this would be good. And my wife and I were living in Tahlequah, Oklahoma at the time, and I was playing football for the Red Men, the northeastern state, Oklahoma. And so we moved down and took the job. Of course, went through all that stuff, the polygraph. I never had a polygraph in my life. I didn't even know what a polygraph was.
That's interesting that they were doing a polygraph back then.
That was in 74. And it started in November 74. And of course, we went to school for all of those things, being a police officer, being a firefighter, being an EMT. And I enjoyed all of those things, but I kept leaning back to the law enforcement side. And so I spent 2 years there. But it was very controlled environment, and there was a lot of petty politics going on that bothered me because there was somebody in American Airlines that the airlines did not want arrested, who needed to be arrested. Oh, but no, the airlines said, no, we don't want to bother them. So that upset me a bit, and I wanted a little more space. I just really wanted to be out in Texas rather than in the confines of the airport, which was huge, and I think geographically or land-wise is probably one of the largest airports still in the state of Texas. So I applied for DPS and went through that process and was accepted in 1976, which oddly enough, about 2 weeks after I got my notice that I'd been accepted to go to DPS, the Dallas Fire Department called and said, hey, you still interested in being a firefighter? We got a spot for you. And I said, no, I've already accepted and I'm going to the DPS Academy. So, and that's how it started with DPS.
How old were you when you started with DPS?
I was 22, I think, when I started the academy, and 23 when I graduated.
Wow, so were you 21 when you started with the airport then?
I think that's right. 21,
okay.
Yeah, I was just a youngster.
Okay, before we go on, give me a little bit of background about what DPS is, what it became essentially. Like, who is covered under DPS?
Texas Department of Public Safety. There's quite a history there. It goes back, actually DPS goes back to 1935, which is not that big a deal. August 10th, 1935 is when they brought in the Highway Patrol from the Texas Department of Transportation. They moved them over to this new organization called Texas Department of Public Safety. And the Rangers were out in another entity, and they brought the two of those entities together in 1935. So as time went on, Texas DPS added other units like the narcotics unit, there was criminal intelligence, Texas Rangers, and then you had that's the criminal law enforcement side. And then motor vehicle theft was another entity. And then there was a traffic law enforcement side, which highway patrol, driver's license, license and weight, now known as CVE, commercial vehicle enforcement, as well as motor vehicle inspection. So I started out in highway patrol, promoted 6 years later, become a narcotics agent, spent 5 years working undercover, enjoyed every minute of it. It was just an adrenaline rush all the time. And I enjoyed every minute of that, as I did with highway patrol. But my true desire was to become a Texas Ranger. And that all started in Rockwall, Yellow Jacket Grill, Courthouse Square. I was in there with my dad, who now was no longer a highway patrolman. He was working for Rockwall, Texas Aluminum there as a manager of transportation. So I'm sitting at the table with my dad, and I knew the sheriff in Rockwall County, smallest county in the state of Texas, but it was B.J. Price, as I recall. I hope I got that right. So the sheriff came in, and there was another guy with him, and he was dressed really nice in suit and vest and big hat. And he came through that door, and the sun was coming up in the east, and that screen door opened up, and he walked in, and that screen door slammed behind him. I looked at my dad and said, "Who's that guy with our sheriff?" W.J. Price. It was W.J. Price. And my dad said, "Well, that's our Texas Ranger. That's Charlie Moore." And I said, "Really? That's a Texas Ranger? What does he do?" And so he tells me a little bit about it. And so, which is kind of entertaining because, like, I don't know, a few weeks later, Charlie Moore came and spoke to our junior high. And he's walking back and forth talking about what it is to be a Texas Ranger. I'm sitting on the front row because I want to have some questions of this man, because he is really interesting, even though my mom didn't want me to be on highway patrol. So, but at any rate, I go so many different directions. So I'm sitting on the front row, and Charlie Moore, Texas Ranger, he's walking back and forth telling some great stories about what it's like to be a Texas Ranger, finding people in cabins, looking for fugitives, investigating crimes. And I said, "Man, that sounds like fun." But I get captivated because each time he walks by, I'm looking at his hip, and he's got a pistol on both sides, and both of them are 1911 45s with ivory grips and gold longhorns on the grips. And I'm looking at those, and then I also noticed that the hammers are back. I was a hunter, and I like to shoot, but I noticed the hammers are back on those 45s, and I thought, "Oh man!" So I kind of drew my toes back up under the seat because I don't want that thing to shoot off one of my toes. And so finally, when he got through telling his stories, he said, "Are there any questions?" And I was the first one. I raised my hand and said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I noticed the hammers are back on those pistols. Is that not dangerous?" And he said, "Yep, Sonny, it's dangerous. And don't ever forget it." So man, it sealed the deal for me. So there I was in narcotics, enjoying every minute of it. We did some good stuff. We worked with DEA a lot. In East Texas, I was in Tyler at the time. And I had that Texas Ranger thing on my mind. And so I finally decided, after 5 years of undercover, I'm going to apply for the Rangers. Still all part of the Texas Department of Public Safety. I'm kind of rambling on here.
No. So it's interesting. It wasn't just that. It wasn't just I mean, yeah, obviously it was your dad, but from the very beginning, it wasn't just law enforcement. It was the Texas Rangers that where you wanted to be.
That's true. From the day that Charlie Moore walked through that door, I had that on my mind, and I really hoped that one day, and I couldn't imagine, because there were just 95 Texas Rangers in the state of Texas now. I think then, but I think now there are probably 150 or so. Joe will be able to answer that better than me. In fact, I'll go off on tangents. So when I was here in Decatur as a ranger, I had Wise Jack in Montague County, and now we're going to have 2 rangers in Wise County alone because of the population and because of the crimes that we have here. So they've grown exponentially. But and I'm sorry, so many stories go through my mind. But I remember when I was in the recruit class of 1976, the ranger chief stood at the podium and starts telling us all about the Texas Rangers, and there are 94 Texas Rangers, and he said that's all there will ever be. 94. There will never be more than that because we want to maintain that mystique. So I applied and was, of course, you had to take the written test. Took the written test, said, okay, you've done well enough, you can go to Austin and compete. And there were like 5 openings, but there were going to be 50 people interviewing. And there'd been like 500 or so who took the test, all from within DPS. So you had to go through the process there. And I sat at the interview board, and I was so dang nervous because I was sitting in there as a young narcotics agent. And it was a long table, and there were like 5 or 6 Texas Ranger captains sitting around that table asking me questions, and I was just nervous as I could be. And I remember one of the questions, and it came from Bobby Prince, who ended up being my captain. But Bobby Prince was sitting right over here to my left, big man, and he said, Aiken, tell me what you would do if you're off down around the border and you get in a pursuit. And that pursuit is headed toward the international bridge, and you're going into Mexico. He said, but you know that the governor has said we cannot go into Mexico in any form or fashion. You remember that? I said, yes, sir. He said, okay, well, you're in pursuit. And you've got a bad guy who has kidnapped a child. And they're headed to Mexico. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to try to get them stopped, Captain, before they ever get to that international bridge. Well, you can't stop him. I said, well, I'll call for aircraft. I'll call for backup. I'll call for roadblocks. And we didn't have spikes then that you can flatten tires. And well, none of that's working, Aiken. What are you going to do? You're coming up on the border. What are you going to do? I said, Captain, I'm going to Mexico. He said, hell you are. Hell, you're going to Mexico. He said, you just started an international crisis. What in the world are you doing? The governor is mad at you because you're not supposed to be. You're probably going to be fired, and you're going into Mexico. Are you still going to Mexico? Yes, sir. I'm going. If he's got a kidnapped child, I'm going. I'm going, Captain. He said, well, I think not. And he grilled me and grilled me and grilled me, and I stayed with the story, and I'm thinking, well, man, I should have backed out of this. I knew it. And so he kept beating me down, saying what a fool I was for doing that. And I said, Captain, it's the only thing I can do. I said, for all I know, that could be my partner's child. I'm going. And he leaned back and he said, all right, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. So, it was stuff like that. It was a beat down, but I've got so many great stories with the Rangers and the characters that are out there and the things that we did. And this flag that's behind me here is a Branch Davidian flag that we took down the night of the fire on April 19th, 1993. So there are a lot of happy memories and a lot of difficult things, but that's there to remind me that we've got to take care of business and not get in those situations again. I'm sorry, I went off. So
No, that was fantastic. That was really great. So can you tell me, back in your day and even today, what are the qualifications to become a ranger?
It has changed a little bit, and I think basically they've got to be members of the Texas Department of Public Safety, probably Highway Patrol or it's CID now. They've done away with narcotics, which I disagree with. So they have to be either CID, Highway Patrol, got to be with DPS 4 years, but they've got to have 8 years experience. Maybe they work law enforcement somewhere else, have 8 years experience. And Job can correct this. But back then, when I was working, you had to have 8 years with DPS. But now I think it's 4 and 4. So you got to have 8 years. And then it's just a matter of going through the process, which is a written test, a background investigation. They look through all your files to make sure that you're not a knucklehead of some sort or another. And then they bring you to the interview board and they vote and make a decision on who's going to be the next ranger.
Do you think that there's one characteristic that kind of makes a ranger that they look for?
I think it's got to be integrity up front. Secondarily, it's got to be a work ethic because it is absolutely relentless. Um, so those two things are very important, but it's unique with the Rangers because they really don't have their own pursuits as a law enforcement agency, and I'm having a little trouble explaining that because they don't have original jurisdiction on things, even though they are a Texas Ranger. They are, according to the government code, they are an assisting agency. And so the vast majority of the stuff that I did here in these three counties was at the request of a sheriff, at the request of a police chief, as a request from one of the prosecutors. So the Rangers have some original jurisdiction on officer-involved shootings as well as corruption. But when it comes to murders, robberies, those kind of things, sexual assaults, they generally would be called by the local entity, agency. So that third attribute that a ranger's got to have is the ability to get along. Because if you're all arrogant, egotistical, don't play well with others, those sheriffs and those police chiefs won't call on you.
Okay. Before I start asking any other questions about your career, I wanted to talk about the history of the badge. Can you explain how you get your badge, how it's made, the lore about that?
Yeah. So I've got one here. This is not one that I wore, and this is one that's the bicentennial badge, and it's got my name on it there. And I mean they are pretty small badges. When you look at this badge and you look at my sheriff's badge, you know, it's a totally different world. But the odd thing is I've got a Ranger badge right in the middle of that one too. So but this is made from a 5 peso, and the preferred year is 1947. So it actually is a coin. If you look at, you can see the ridges on the side there, and then when you look at the back of it, you can actually see the coin of that 5 peso, and it's pure silver. And the reason that the Rangers opted to do that, it kind of changed over time, but this is what they've been doing probably for at least 50 years. This badge. The reason they did that, because of the Rangers of old, that go back to 1823, they made their badges out of whatever they could, which was, generally speaking, what was a coin. And they would just carve it out and use it. And so they thought that this would be a good thing to do, to mimic to some extent and to bring history along with the Rangers.
Okay, so if I have my history right, so first of all, a couple things. If I understand this right, there's really only 3 people in the state of Texas that actually make that badge.
I think you're right, and this is one of them. The other one is out toward the Panhandle, and I think one in San Antonio.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure.
And then you tell me if I got this right. It's my understanding that when you start as a Ranger, you start off as a sergeant, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you start off as a sergeant, you get a silver badge, but at some point when you, for lack of a better term, you go into management, but I don't think that's a correct term for a Ranger. But once you get to that level, your badge goes from a silver badge to a gold badge.
Yes.
And I'm assuming you have a gold badge too?
Well, not as a Ranger.
Okay.
I don't. I was a lieutenant, and the lieutenant still had the silver.
Oh, okay. So at what point in the Rangers do you get a gold badge?
Well, when I was there, it was the captain. So, but they did away with the captains, and now they got majors. So you go from being a lieutenant to being a major, basically, in the regions, in the companies.
Okay.
And I think now there are 8 companies all across the state of Texas, and all of those majors were a gold Texas Ranger badge.
Okay.
And it's made from I think a 50 cent piece, actual gold. So they are really highly sought and very expensive.
I think they're all very sought after.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to that badge there, why a specific year? Why 47 or 46, and why a Mexican peso?
Mm-hmm. Again, it goes back to history, and it's just something that the Texas Department of Public Safety said, hey, this 47 is a pretty good size. It's full. It's sure enough silver. So let's stick with that.
Okay.
And I don't know, and this has been a question in my mind for quite some time. Are they going to run out of those things? But it seems as though they don't. But it's not just not just 1947. There are additional years too, I think, but most of them are 47.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's get to your career a little bit. So you start, what year do you start as a Texas Ranger?
That was 1987.
Okay. So 1987. Do you know how old you are at that point?
I was 35. I just turned 35.
35. Well, I said you obviously you know how old you are at that point. Okay. So you're 35. You start as a Texas Ranger. Do you develop a specialty? Is there something in particular that you become known for as a Ranger?
Well, I think it was just investigations overall.
Right.
And my first station was Columbus, which is, so I'll give you a quick story on that. So it was November 13th, 1987. It was cold and it was a Friday afternoon. And I was in my narcotics car headed up to Mineola from Tyler. And so a call came over the radio that I needed to call Austin and talk to Maurice Cook, who was the assistant senior ranger captain. So I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be bad news or is it going to be good news? And so I pulled into Kid Jones in Mineola, which is a convenience store on the north side. And of course, we didn't have cell phones then. And I went to the north side and that north wind was blowing. And so I got on the phone there, the pay phone. Imagine that, a pay phone. And I dialed up Austin. I knew the number off the top of my head, not for the Rangers, but for DPS in general. I can almost recall it now. But I got on the phone. I said, I need to speak with Maurice Cook, the assistant senior ranger captain. So they put me through to his office. And he got on the phone and he said, Lane, congratulations. You're going to be a Texas Ranger. And I thought, man, I was so excited. My heart was just pounding. And so the next question is, where am I going to go? Because we're in Tyler. My wife loves Tyler. Is she going to be happy about where I'm being sent? Because I knew there was going to be a vacancy in Athens, which is just like 30 miles down the road. Great spot, Athens. And I'm thinking he's going to say Athens. He said, you're going to Columbus. And I just froze. I thought, where the hell is Columbus? I knew of Columbus, Ohio, and Columbus, Georgia. But I didn't know there was a Columbus in Texas. I'd been in North Texas most of my career, and so I was excited on one side, but I was kind of sick to my stomach on the other because I'm going to Columbus. And I said, "Well, Captain Cook, where's Columbus?" He said, "Well, Aiken, it's on I-10 between Houston and San Antonio, right there on the north side of I-10." He said, "Get you an apple and the road map, and you be there." I think it was like January 3rd or so. So that's Columbus. So I went down there at being a narcotics agent. So that's what I knew. I'd been working undercover, knew all about search warrants. But I go down there in 3 counties: Austin County, Fayette County, Colorado County. And I really didn't know anything about investigations other than the drug investigation. So I really paired up with the investigators in those sheriff's offices and learned a lot from them. But soon after that, they started sending me to schools to learn more about investigations, interrogation, interview skills, so many things. It was just constant in school to learn all this stuff. And then they'd send us books. You read this and learn about this. And it was just one school after another. So as far as I guess, I was called on a lot because of interviewing skills and interrogation, but also crime scene. That's the unfortunate thing that we had back then, because we didn't have crime scene teams like we do here at Wise County right now. We've got an excellent duo over there who are remarkable in crime scene. But the back end of my Ranger car was packed with CSI stuff. So I did a lot of that, but then generally speaking, it was kind of like a one show deal. You not only are the crime scene guy, you end up being the interview guy, because again, we were talking about that just a bit earlier. You've got to be able to get along, and those people, but you've got to do your job. You've got to be there to help them, and they got to see that there's a value for you being there. So as time went on, and so I told my wife when I was going to move on and try to be a ranger, I said I'll be home a lot more than I will, working undercover for DPS narcotics. And so she was all in because I'm going to be at home more, being a Texas Ranger. But I got down there and I just loved the work. And working with those guys and gals from all those other agencies, it was most enjoyable. And we put a lot of bad guys in jail, some significant cases that we worked on down there. But I was a North Texas guy. So for the first 6 months, I was down there by myself because my wife was a teacher and we had two young children, so she wasn't in a position to come down there. And so finally, when the summer comes, I moved the family down there, and it was great having them there. And but I'm still working all the time because those guys who I've been working with, they think it's going to continue. And if they asked me to come help, I couldn't tell them no. I just couldn't because they wouldn't call me anymore because I don't have original jurisdiction. So I've got to have those people calling. So I go to everything, and I'm working all the time. And I come in late one night after out working with Sealy PD, I think it was, and my wife opened the door and she had tears in her eyes, and I said, "What's wrong?" She wouldn't say anything. She just turned around and walked away. I said, "Have I done something to offend you?" And she spun around and said, "You haven't been here long enough to offend me." So it was kind of a catch-22. I love the work, but it was relentless.
Can you remember your first arrest with the Rangers, or can you remember a significant case that made an impact on you?
Well, yeah, I remember the first one, and it was a terrible, terrible deal. It was my first murder case that actually happened in Austin County. I was working with the sheriff up there, Bubba Brzezowski, great guy. And some of these things, kind of, bring back memories that make it kind of tough. But what happened on this deal was a young woman had fallen in lust with a guy who was a ne'er do well, always in trouble, very controlling, and she had a 5-year-old daughter, beautiful little redheaded girl. And he drove them to a hog pen one night and drug them out, shot them both, killed them. The daughter and then the mother. Threw the mother on top of the little girl. So that was my first murder, double murder, capital murder, and it was a bad old deal. Those images, even though that was probably in '88, those images still are in your head because I can see that little girl, how precious she was, and it's just unbelievable that she lost her life that way with her mother. So it wasn't hard to find out who had done it because he was the last one with them. They'd been in some kind of party. He and she had been drinking, and probably he was jealous, and so he just shot and killed both of them. But we went about our business, the sheriff's office and I did. We went about the business trying to find this guy and the vehicle because we knew that basically it was a crime scene itself. So there was crime scene there, the crime scene in the truck. So we put out an APB, all points bulletin, looking for this guy. And lo and behold, Gallup, New Mexico, highway patrol, New Mexico highway patrol, find him. Going through, headed, just over the Continental Divide, and he was headed out further west. They put him in jail, so Bubba Brzezowski and I, with DPS Airlines, I call them that, DPS Airlines, DPS Aircraft. I know DEA had an abundance of airlines, and I know some of those pilots, but at any rate, so we fly to Columbus, Bubba and I did. And, well, actually, in another Ranger, whose name fails me right now, but it'll come to me here in a minute. So another Ranger, and so we were going to bring the truck back so that we could do the crime scene work on it. We're going to haul it back behind a U-Haul or something, get it back. Brian. His first name was Brian. So we get there and we interview the guy and everything goes well. So we cuff him up. We got extradition. We're bringing him back to Texas, and so Bubba wants to sit up front with the pilot, and I'm sitting at the back with this guy who literally looks like a mountain man. He's all bearded over, and he smelled of blood. A lot of blood got on him, and he just stunk unbelievably bad. That's my first arrest. And so I'm sitting in the plane, and the bulkhead is right here. I'm sitting here, and he's sitting across the aisle facing me. Of course, we've got leg chains on him and the belt around him, got him all cuffed up. And we start over the Continental Divide, and that plane is just jumping up and down. And I'm not feeling too good. And all of a sudden, he's not feeling good either. And he says, I just don't feel good. And he's leaning forward, snot's running out of his nose. I'm trying to survive this deal, 'cause we got a long way to go. We got to get back to Sealy or Belleville, Texas. And here we are trying to get over the Continental Divide. And it was a bumpy ride, bouncing around. Finally, he starts throwing up back there. Of course, Bubba's sitting up front. And the ranger, the ranger is kind of subservient to the sheriff. So the sheriff said, he'd lean back, everything okay back there, Aiken? I said, yeah, Sheriff, everything's good. And so this guy, who I disdained because of what he had done, he looked up between one of his throwing up sessions, and he said, I think I'll just jump. And I said, I think I'll help you. But I reached around and told the pilot, I said, we need to land someplace pretty quick because I'm about to lose it too back there. And he's still not doing it. And the back of that plane would just throw up everywhere and snot. And so we land in Lubbock at the FBO. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, the FBO, fixed base operator. And so we land there, and it's one of those planes that, steps go down and then the top goes up. You've probably been in one of those. And so as soon as that plane comes to a stop, we're right there in front of the hangar and sort of the FBO. So I open those doors and I grab him by his chains on his legs, on his ankles, because he won't get up. And I'm dragging him through the vomit in the floor. And he starts out those steps and kind of bump, go down. And then he rolls up under the plane. And I just walk around trying to clear my head because this is a hellacious trip. And I just don't know how I can get back in that plane. And I'm trying to get my wits about me. I look up, and there are probably about 50 people leaning up against the glass watching what's going on. I'm glad they didn't have cameras in their pocket back then because I'd have been on the news that night in Lubbock. And I'm sure my captain wouldn't be any too proud of me. But that was my first arrest.
Wow. Holy mackerel. So, Lane, I want to ask you about a case later on that you dealt with when you're sheriff here. And I think I'm going to know the answer to this question based on an interview that I saw you do, as well as the story that you're just telling. But were there specific cases that affected you more than others?
Well, and that what I just talked about was the first one, and that image of that little girl never goes away. But it's just something that is a reminder. We've got to keep doing what we're doing, because we need to do everything we can to protect our children. But the one most recent is the Athena Strand case, and that was really tough. That would have been started on November 30th, 2022, and we found her, I think, on December 3rd. Yeah, so December 3rd, we found her in the Trinity River. And of course, that one's still in the works. It's coming up for investigation. Coming up for trial the investigation is done. Everything's to the DA's office. So the criminal justice system is working. The district attorney is pursuing the death penalty on that. But you know, some of those things just really get in your head, and it's hard to get away from it. That night, I spent a lot of time with the family, and that's one of the most difficult things about being a sheriff, is reaching out to the family, and because they need to know what's going on. There's got to be a level of transparency with that family, and you've got the news media, you know, just clamoring around, just constantly shouting things at you when you're trying to take care of the family. Because we start out as she's a missing child. And we had all hope in the world that we're going to find this little girl, just precious girl. Again, she's 7 years old, 2 years older than the first one, who was 5. So we worked and we worked hard. And so many of the community, the way that they came out to help us in that search, I mean, we put them to work too because they care. And we had search teams all over that area around where her house was. So working with the citizens, working with the rangers, as well as the people of the Wise County Sheriff's Office, it was all hands on deck for us because this is a missing child. We need to find her. You know, it's a typical deal when you're working those, because at first it's all about the search. You know, you got this investigation down here. Well, you know, there could have been something nefarious going on. But as time goes on, the search lessens and the investigation, you know, rises. And now it's all investigation because we've looked everywhere. We can't find her. It's a bad old deal. So that night, and I give all credit to our investigators, to the Rangers and the FBI helped us on that with their digital evidence. They were amazing. We probably could have gotten it done in a week, but as a result of their help, we got it done in 3 days. And we've got this guy who's been arrested, a contractor for FedEx. He's in our jail right now, waiting for trial. So that night, I had 2 conversations with the family because we thought we knew where she was. And I had that conversation in the Baptist church there in Cottondale in a little classroom. There were probably about, I'd say, 7 or 8 members of the family in there. And I went in and told them where we were, what we thought. I said, but we won't know for sure. Give me a few minutes, 30 or 45 minutes, and I'll come back. So I went out there and worked with our guys, crime scene guys, FBI guys were there too. The Rangers were there, and they found Athena in the water, and she was deceased, and so it really breaks your heart. And then now that I have the evidence, we're going to have to let the media know sometime soon. I went back to the Cottondale Church and went in the room with them and told them that Athena had been found and she wasn't coming home alive. She was on her way to the Dallas Medical Examiner's office. You know, those things should never happen, but they do. Because we live in a fractured world, but in law enforcement, we've got to stand above it, and we've got to make sure that criminal justice takes its course. So this guy remains in our jail. But I got home that night, probably about 3 o'clock that morning, and maybe I had, as well as all the guys who worked for us, maybe I'd had about 4 hours sleep over those 3 days. You've been there. You know how it goes sometimes. But I had an important engagement that morning. And that's where it touches you, because my wife and I were going to babysit our children, our grandchildren. One was 5, and the other one was about 1 at the time. And so when you got things you got to do, and I told my wife when I woke up that morning, I said, if I could, I'd walk away right now. Because I felt at that moment that I'd seen enough. From the 5-year-old to the 7-year-old, I've seen enough. But the voters elected me, and I respect the voters. And I'm going to do my duty until the end, and I'm not running again. This is my last term. You mentioned that earlier. This is my last term. But that one really touched me because I related it to my own family, because I had that relationship with the family, because this is one of the most evil things that I've ever seen. And there's a lot of evidence behind that I really can't discuss, but it's just a hard situation.
So Lane, I'm curious about how you personally deal with stuff like this. So obviously I talked to a lot of officers, a lot of special agents, and everybody deals with things differently. You have federal agencies have EAP counselors, and people talk about, hey, the need for working out and keeping themselves in shape and everything else. But how do you, after, geez, how many years have you been in law enforcement?
50.
So 50 years of law enforcement. How do you keep yourself sane, for the lack of a better term, when you're dealing with evil, bad things over the course of 50 years?
Well, there's only one thing, and it's really everything I need, and that's faith. I truly have a great amount of faith, and I could not do this job without that. And we do believe in counseling. We've sent a lot of our guys to counseling, and after this Branch Davidian deal, I was sent for counseling as well. I didn't want to go to counseling, but my captain said, you don't have an option. You're going, because it was my job to pick up many of those bodies during the Branch Davidian deal. And my wife and I were building a house, probably about 5 miles that way. And Captain, in fact, I was trying to save money, because being a Texas Ranger, you didn't make much money. So we had this process going. We're putting saltillo tile all over the 1,000 square feet downstairs. And so it's my job, my son, my daughter, my mother-in-law, and my wife. We were all there working on this project. And it was going pretty well. And then my pager went off. And I had a car phone at that time. So I went out and got on the phone. It was Captain Burns, a great guy out of Dallas. He said, Lane, I need you to be in Austin Monday. And I was on a deadline because the lender was going to come and see what stage our house is in, to make sure that we can keep borrowing money to buy this house. And I said, Captain, I don't have time to go to Austin. He said, you don't understand. You're going to have to go to Austin. I said, but Captain, why do I need? He said, because you need counseling. I said, I don't need any Branch Davidian counseling. I need saltillo tile counseling. You got any of that? And he said, Aiken, I'm not going to argue with you. You be there Monday. You understand? And I said, okay, Captain.
Okay. So Lane, is there an age, or is there a forced age retirement for the Rangers?
There was.
Is that why you left?
No, it's not. But Childress.
Okay.
About, probably 150, 200 miles that way.
Okay.
Childress on 287. Leo Hickman turned 65. This was several years ago. And Leo said, hell no, I'm not retiring. I'm going to keep working. And so the director of the Department of Public Safety and the attorney, they all got together, started wringing their hands, and they said, what are we going to do? Leo's 65, and it's mandatory that he retires. And they said, well, he won't go away. He keeps working. What are we going to do? And so they all looked at each other and said, why don't we just go give up on that policy that you've got. Let's just shove that under the rug and let's don't do that anymore. They can work as long as they want to. So my decision, actually, your optimal uh, retirement time is when you're 50, and you pretty much get full what's the word I'm looking for, retirement. So you get that pension. That's what I was looking for. So you get that pension, and you make pretty much the same money that you're making working, but of course you don't get a raise from that time on. We don't get COLAs like the feds do. So teachers do, but oh no, not Texas Rangers. So I had no intention of retiring, and the only reason to be a lieutenant in the Texas Rangers at that time was to be a captain. And so I was up to being a captain. So I polled those captains who were out there, all great men. Think the world of all of them. But there was not going to be a vacancy for 6 years. And so the only path I had was to stay as a lieutenant, or if I wanted to be a captain, I'd have to take a position in Austin, on some kind of staff captain. And I didn't want to be in Austin as a staff captain. I liked what I was doing out in the field. Going to be 6 to 8 years. And then the phone rang, and it was corporate security from AT&T. I said, hey, would you be interested? And they told me how much I'd be making. I thought, golly. This was in April of 2003. And it just seemed like too good to be true, but I didn't want to leave because I wanted to be captain, but that's going to be 6 or 8 years until I can be captain in the field. And so I talked to my wife, and we prayed about it, and I couldn't decide. I lost weight trying to make a decision whether or not I was going to retire from the Rangers. And so my decision on that, it kind of comes back to the other stories I was telling. I had a granddaughter who now is 21, soon to be 22, good kid. And so she was sitting on my lap, drinking milk, a little bottle. She's taking her bottle. And so I'm watching the Texas Ranger baseball game and enjoying that. And I'm mulling all the cons and pros on whether or not I should retire. And I put my head on top of her. She had fallen asleep, and I put my chin on top of her head. And the smell of her hair, thought, what the hell, Lane? Why are you fretting over this? This child needs some additional revenue. So I can do more for this child and my wife. Why are you going to stick with the Rangers when you can make this much more money? So I can double my salary, basically. And so I did. I retired and took that AT&T job. And I kid you not, 2 or 3 months after that, a captain got mad and retired. I was sick. I'm still sick to this day.
So why, with all your time in law enforcement, you do corporate security, why come back? Why come back and go into law enforcement again?
Well, that's a interesting story too. Because, and I was a reserve the whole time. So I was a special ranger, special Texas Ranger. So I count that as law enforcement time because I would associate and do a few things as a reserve. But 2003, I'd been retired probably 2 months, and I'm on a place called Prairie Mountain Ranch. A friend of mine, that windmill picture there is from there. Prairie Mountain Ranch. Down there hunting. And the local district attorney, Sam Oakman, who's been a long-time friend of mine. He's like one of the longest-serving district attorneys in the state of Texas at the time. Just quite a character and most enjoyable. And so we were out sitting around the fire pit in November of 2003 and drinking a little beer. Sam never bought his own beer. He always drank mine, but that's a cheap price to pay for the wisdom that I got from Sam. But Sam and I were talking. He said, Lane, do you miss the Rangers? And I said, Sam, I do. I miss it. I miss it badly because I don't feel like I'm making a difference anymore. And he drank a little more of my beer and he said, well, if you want to make a difference, Lane, become a Texas sheriff in a county of less than 60,000. If you want to make a difference, do that. I mean, and that's one of those things that just infiltrated my mind. It's kind of like my mother saying, I want you to be an accountant. Sam saying, if you want to make a difference, being a sheriff. And I've been around sheriffs all my life. And I know how difficult it looked to me to be a sheriff because there's so many working pieces to be a sheriff. It doesn't even compare to being a Texas Ranger. And I never really wanted to be a sheriff because of seeing all the things that the sheriffs have to handle. But Sam said that to me. And I end up, I'm kind of leaving out a step or two here, but it would go on forever if I didn't. So I'm working for AT&T, and I'm in charge of international investigations. And so I'm in Bangalore, India, and the guy who was sitting at this desk at that time was David Walker, a friend of mine. We worked a lot of investigations together, just a great kid. When I say kid, he's 20 years younger than me. And I never thought that I'd have the opportunity to be a sheriff. And in this very office one day, I told David Walker, I said, if you ever decide you don't want to run, call me. I might like to run for sheriff because of Sam Oakman, that knucklehead drinking my beer. Put those seeds in my head, and so I'm in Bangalore, India. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning, maybe 5:30 in the morning, standing on a rooftop, and of course it's 11 and a half hours difference. I don't know why in India it's a half hour difference. Everything else is even up, but not India. Oh no. And so my phone rang, and I looked at it, and it was David Walker. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. It was afternoon here, probably 5 o'clock or so. And so I answered the phone. He said, Aiken? He always called me Aiken. I always called him Walker. He said, Aiken, I've decided I'm not going to run again. Would you be interested in running? And I said, I'll be on the next plane back. And so I came back and ran for sheriff. And luckily enough, on March 1st, 2016, the voters voted me in.
Very good.
Your question.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You got to forgive me.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so 2 last questions that I like to always ask, but I'm going to ask you a different question.
Mm-hmm.
We talked prior to us starting a recording. You've been married for 51 years. Yes. How do you keep a marriage going for 51 years, being in law enforcement and putting in the hours and the dedicated work that you did?
Well, and I think, again, it comes first and foremost is faith, and having that. We're in church almost every Sunday. Sometimes I'm hunting and I can't be there. So, or maybe there's a bad old deal going and I'm working on my job. But so we do that. But I go back to my first police academy at DFW Airport, and there was a guy there who was the chief of the whole DFW DPS. So it was police agency as well as all those things that I've said that they were. It was called the DFW DPS. No relation to the Texas DPS. But Lynn Limmer, who had been the police chief, I think in Irving, but he had moved over and taken his job at DFW Airport. A great guy. And he stood up and talked to us, these young recruits, about the importance of having a life outside law enforcement. He said, find other things to do. Go to church, join a club, do other things, have friends who are other than law enforcement. He said, it's okay to associate a little bit, but don't make your whole life around law enforcement, because as you know, there can be some negativity in law enforcement from time to time. So I really adhered to that over time. I've got a lot of acquaintances in law enforcement. I don't have, and I've got some friends, but I have 2 different lives. So there's the family life with my wife, which is most important to me, and then there's professional side, which is law enforcement. And really, the two of them don't meet too often. I don't talk a lot when I go home about what goes on in this office, and I focus on family. And we're teaching now to the young kids who work here at the sheriff's office leadership classes every third and fourth Wednesday, 8 o'clock in the morning. And between every chapter, we throw up there, it's faith, family, profession. Faith, family, profession. And so having those acquaintances outside law enforcement, I think has helped me have a bit of clarity. And I've seen this in the program that you're going to pursue. I think will define some of this, because you come in as a young officer and it's all you know, it's all you want to do, but you gotta keep that other side of your life going and try to compartmentalize those things.
Okay, final question for you, Lane. You can look back on your life. Can you see a change in the way that you view people and society from when you first started law enforcement to now?
I do, and it's unfortunate. I think there's always been a little bit of a negativity amongst the community, and that people do not always appreciate law enforcement. You know, as a ranger, I put two sheriffs in their own jail because of corruption, um, and that was really a setback for me and disappointment. And I've seen that in law enforcement from time to time, and so that really taints the mindset of the community. And especially, and I guess if I wasn't watching the news, I'd have a different opinion of this because of being here in Wise County. If I was just paying attention to Wise County, I think I'd say it's never been better, because these citizens here, they appreciate law enforcement. But over time, I think it's gotten worse. And in fact, we have had an onslaught on a couple of situations when someone has disagreed with something that one of our deputies might have done, and ends up on video, and then that goes on the internet, and we just get an onslaught of hateful, terribly hateful and vulgar calls that we get from society in general. But I think those are the few that we really deal with. And I don't know exactly. They're groups of people who are focused on trying to tear down law enforcement. And that's why I really appreciate what you're doing. And we have experienced that on two occasions. The first one was a guy who was arrested by Highway Patrol, put in our jail, and he was an independent candidate for president. His name is Kokesh. And he had so many followers, and my goodness, 2 weeks of absolute hell around here. We'd have people out there with video cameras. They're calling us, they're emailing us, they're bombarding us on all of the internet as much as they can. So those things are something that we didn't deal with before social media. And I think social media plays a big part of this, but I think sometimes we overestimate what social media causes. Because in reality, I'd say the vast majority of the people here in Wise County do not know that we have been bombarded by these knuckleheads who say some things that are unbelievable, even to our female people who answer the phones. It's just been ugly that comes this way, and we didn't experience that early on, so it's gotten worse over time. And I just had a conversation this morning with a woman who is really concerned because she saw that sheriff out of Ohio, Butler, Ohio, I think Sheriff Jones, talking about basically the end of the world is upon us. It's on some stuff on YouTube, I think. And so she's worried that she's in a spot where she may be in danger right here in Wise County. So I spoke with her about 30 minutes. And then she saw things the same way that I did, that this is a good place to live, work, worship, and play. So I think we're better off to some extent, but I pine away for those early days because all you had was the editor to the letter. the letter to the editor. That was the only social media we had. And if you didn't read the paper, you never knew about it. So it's just a little bit of a different deal. And I don't know. I've rambled around, Niles, on that question. I hope I answered it.
Well, no, you definitely hit on part of what I was getting at, but I wanted your own personal. So do you view, after 51 years or 50 years of being in law enforcement, do you see people just in general out in society, are you more suspicious, more worried, more pessimistic of people as opposed to when you began?
Okay, so if we bring that down to Wise County,
Yeah.
I think it's better than it's ever been.
Okay.
Right here in Wise County. But when I start watching the news, I have a little bit of a different opinion. And so I try to watch the news only in the morning and not look at it throughout the day. But I am blessed, Niles. I am truly blessed to serve the citizens of Wise County as their sheriff because they are very supportive. So often our deputies will be in a restaurant and they see that uniform and they buy their lunch. It happens time and time and time again. So I am very thankful to the support. And I think the support that we get here is because of what has been seen in the news, the way that law enforcement has been treated elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, that clarify all that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Lane, thank you very much for the interview. I really appreciate
It was my pleasure. Thanks for your program and what you're doing here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.